Hi, I'm the Space Quest historian. This is Boris. He's the chosen one. I'm not exactly sure how or why he ended up deserving such a lofty, grandiose title, and neither does the game he stars in. Universe, developed and released by Core Design, yes, these guys, hi pointy tits, in 1994 for the Amiga CD32, and DOS PCs. This is the first game in a new retrospective series I'm calling not Space Quest, because I'm going to be taking a look at a handful of science fiction games that came out around the same time as the Space Quest series, and how they are all inferior to the glory that is the Space Quest series. And this game is one that I've wanted to play for decades, ever since my younger brother bought the CD-ROM version back in the mid-90s, because it looked so damn cool, but we could never make any progress in it. And now, having played it as an adult, I can understand why we were struggling so badly. It is a frankly bewildering mess that has the monolithic aspirations of being a space opera in the vein of classics like Dune, Flash Gordon, and in particular Star Wars, but is so caught up in its own excitement that it fails to provide anything that closely resembles a satisfyingly cohesive story, and, to compound matters, is also absolutely excruciating to actually play. The game begins with the deceptively simple premise of Boris, a stereotypically insufferable British teenager, visiting his uncle and finding a strange teleportation device in his house, because, you know, that's uncles for you. They're either crazy inventors in their spare time, or they're yeah. Anyway, displaying a stupendous lack of self-preservational instinct and common sense, Boris leaps into the machine, presses a few buttons, and is immediately transported into an alternate dimension with no clue of his whereabouts or how to get back home. So yeah, it's basically the sci-fi version of the setup to Simon the Sorcerer. But despite being stranded in an alien world next to a satellite dish and a seemingly unreachable alien city, Boris remains remarkably unflappable and immediately begins picking up trash from the asteroid below. Trash that will, incidentally, remain in your inventory unused for the rest of the game. After somehow repairing the satellite dish with a discarded circuit board that was just lying around amongst the trash heaps, the bridge extends and he's now able to reach the city. Here he starts knocking on random doors until a woman named Sylphina, with 2 A's, invites him inside, warns him that he is in great danger, and then gets knocked out by an armed patrol droid, all in the span of less than 2 minutes. She's fine though, since you can actually still talk to her after she's been decked and have a delightful conversation, with the menacing patrol droid politely waiting around for you to finish because no one bothered to QA test this bit. Also, she shows up again at the ending alive and well, but we'll get to that part. During this conversation, she tells Boris to get his ass to a place called the Wheel World and look up her friend Melina, also with 2 A's, who might be able to keep him safe since he doesn't have an ID and all the security droids therefore assumes he's a subversive and will shoot him on sight. Great. Well, since she's obviously busy downstairs, we take this opportunity to steal her clothes, jump out the window, and steal her car as well. I mean, it's not like she's gonna be needing it, right? After somehow guessing the correct activation code, it's in the manual that came with the game, but it's also possibly the shittiest form of copy protection known to man since it's the same code every time you play, Boris then has a vision of an opulent throne room where some evil dude is telling another evil dude that there's an alien presence amongst them, obviously Boris, and that this dude on the floor should go off and kill that presence since it might pose a threat to them. I don't really see what kind of threat they think some scrawny little dude who's barely old enough to drive and one whose first instinct upon arriving in a completely alien city is to toss himself down one of their public garbage disposals is. Seriously, Boris just cannot get enough of garbage. He's also picked up this discarded fast food container that was lying on the street when he arrived here, and if your first guess is that this also remains in your inventory throughout the game because it has absolutely no practical use whatsoever, you would be depressingly correct. Anyway, off he fucks in his new flying car, which can also traverse vast distances of open space, so apparently clearing the atmospheres of entire planets and then orbiting and landing on other ones, not to mention traveling at what appears to be faster than light speeds to get there without getting semi-concussed at the G-forces each of those actions would inflict on the human body, is something that's probably explained away casually in the manual, along with the reason for why Boris can withstand high pressure and low oxygen environments without, respectively, getting mushed to bits or going full Ronnie Cox. Boris gets intercepted by a space smuggler with eyebrows that wiggle like a wet dog shaking itself dry, who tells him in no uncertain terms that if he hasn't got anything to trade the next time they run into each other, his ass is toast. Okay, real friendly people around here. The next bit of the game is a bit fluff and is pretty much just a side quest where Boris murders an innocent alien in order to collect these sentient little blob creatures that he then hands over to this Yoda-like dude who trades him back some fucking drugs. I'm not even kidding. And then, predictably, the smuggler alien shows up again and Boris trades him the drugs for passage to the Wheel World. And yes, we just witnessed a British teenager becoming an interstellar drug dealer. Hot damn, universe, how far are you gonna take this? We went from Grand Theft Auto to cold-blooded murder to fucking drug dealing. What's next? Human trafficking? Anyway, upon reaching the Wheel World, Boris commits another murder of sorts by pushing this robot off a ledge just so he can steal a piece of cable from its toolbox. Boris is just a straight-up sociopath, which, now that I think about it, is actually just part and parcel for 90s adventure game protagonists. Simon was a bit shit too, and don't get me started on George Stobart or Guybrush Threepwood. I guess it's not really a proper classic point-and-click adventure game unless you ruin at least one person's life in the pursuit of your goals, but Boris here takes things to a new and exciting level of callousness. Case in point, he orders another fresh batch of addictive narcotics from this vending machine, then drugs this guy at a bar with it because, well, no real reason actually, other than this guy being really smug about being a volunteer member of the security forces, who apparently hasn't gotten the memo yet of you being an actual fugitive because he's busy living the life with one hand on an arcade machine's joystick and the other one wrapped around a glass of brandy. On our way back to our flying car to celebrate another life shattered, the main plot of the game finally decides to show up in the form of Boris witnessing this old dude getting mugged by a gang of jetpackers who look like they're straight out of an early 90s arcade game. Boris suddenly decides on the spot that this injustice will not stand, despite him having already committed a trifecta of patently horrific crimes, and he sets off in his flying car that he stole to hunt down and kill, yes, kill these bastards to avenge the old dude. I get the feeling this isn't just an altruistic kindness sort of affair on Boris's part. I think he just saw an opportunity to add more souls to his rising body count and leapt at the chance with reckless abandon. In his somewhat limited defense, these guys didn't just mug the old dude, they lobbed up his fucking hand, which is a bit extra, I think we can all agree. So Boris sets off on a high-speed chase and proceeds to murder all of them in this fairly impressive 3D shoot-'em-up sequence that, to its credit, is also really easy to finish because not only do you discover that your flying car has a fucking laser gun attached, but you can also ram these fuckers against the side of buildings and take no damage in the process. In fact, I have no idea what the fail state of this sequence even is because I beat it first try on both the PC and Amiga versions, even though the PC version very unhelpfully swaps out the sensible car goes wherever you point the mouse control scheme for fucking flight sim controls where up is down and down is up, and if you don't keep moving constantly, the car drifts upwards so it's nearly impossible to get a good lock on the enemies as they zoom towards you. Anyway, we get the severed hand back and return it to its rightful owner, who somehow hasn't passed out yet from loss of blood or done something sensible like go to the hospital. Nah, he's just chilling out downtown waiting for us to show back up with his missing limb. And what, is he seriously gonna reattach it, or is he just gonna pickle it and keep it in a jar, or what the fuck? I mean, he says he's a healer, so I guess he's gonna be fine, but he's clearly suffering from some sort of shock-induced delirium because he starts spouting off a bunch of religious bullshit about how your chance encounter with each other was actually foretold in a dream he had, wherein his magical friend in the sky, the universal creator, wackadoo alert, also told him to hand you a piece of a star chart for reasons that he doesn't bother explaining. Honestly, at this point, I'd completely forgotten why we even came here in the first place, but Boris remembers that we were supposed to find this lady named Melina, with 2 A's, who was gonna keep us safe from the death squads, but the old dude is like, nah, she got taken away and sent to the gulags before you got here, and then offers to take us to a safe place instead. We get about 10 steps down the road before this beefy looking fuck teleports in with 2 of his heavily armed robots, and the old dude is like, forget it, just run away, which we then do, despite having no idea where to go. We jump back down to where this homeless guy's hanging out. I guess maybe Boris's plan was to use his ass as a human shield, but luckily these dumbass murder droids can't aim downwards, so Boris runs around like a headless chicken for a while until he stumbles into a screen change hotspot that leads to an overpass overlooking a transit system. Believing himself to be out of options and fully embracing his characteristic disregard for his own personal safety, he YOLOs onto the speeding train despite them seemingly going 1,000,000 miles a second, and somehow doesn't get splattered by the impact, arriving safely, and plot conveniently, at an interstellar spaceport. But how do we get inside? Well, I forgot to mention that earlier, whilst exploring one of the planets, Boris picked up this service droid near a crashed spaceship. Again, Boris seems to be unnaturally drawn to picking up trash wherever he finds it, and This droid is fucking magical. It's basically a Deus Ex Machina machine. It's a Hoover, it's a hoverboard, it can shoot poisonous gas, and it can also open locked doors to spaceports. And this, unfortunately, is the end of the line for the little fella, as this action short-circuits it into oblivion. Boris shows no remorse for his little buddy and instead leaves his adorable plastic ass to rot while he buys a ticket on the next Starliner out of Dodge and escapes his pursuers. We're on our way to the Mekhthalar Galaxy, which borders a region of space inhabited by a species of crab-like aliens called the Mechalians. They're at war with another race called the Vergans, which I consistently misread as the Virgin race, as in they're all a bunch of virgin incels running around taking out their blue ball frustrations on everyone else. And I can't tell if these crappy dudes are getting their ass handed to them by these Vergan assholes, or if they're just about to get their asses kicked. I mean, this dude says they're at war with the Mechalians, but you also get the impression that they're not even really sure what the Mechalian look like. So look, there's a lot about this whole conflict backstory that's not very clear. Chiefly because the writing just expects you to get on board with just a few text boxes of exposition and no context for any of this shit. As far as I can tell, the Vergans are trying to expand their territory into Mechalian space and mine their natural resources and generally stick their virgin peckers where it doesn't belong because blah blah blah. Why am I getting involved in this interstellar politics bullshit when I can't even find my own cabin on this shit pile of a ship? Seriously, all these corridors look the same and they didn't even bother putting signs in front of the rooms. Well, to be fair, we're in room 1 on floor 1, so that's not that hard to find, but later you'll be asked to go to someone else's room that's not the first room on the floor, and that's when things starts getting a little confusing. And not just because of the identical looking corridors or the fact that these roaming droids sometimes get stuck on corners. In fact, that last part is just a bit of unintentional comic relief. No, the complexity escalates here because Boris overhears a rumor that there might be another one of those healers on board, you know, like the dude that got his hand lopped off. Apparently these healers are in with a rebel alliance that I don't recall hearing about up until this point, or they're friends with the Mechalian crabs, or whatever. It's never really made especially clear what their deal is because, again, the game doesn't really bother explaining much of anything. But whatever it is, it's bad news bears for them because it turns out that those jetpackers you slammed against a few buildings an hour or so ago were sent at the behest of Baron Kaliv. Now, we've met him before. He was this dude that teleported in on our ass on the wheel world and set us train hopping. He's also the dude getting yelled at by this other dude, the Emperor King, in the cutscene in the throne room, and we haven't really talked about him yet, but we will get to that in due time. Anyway, the Baron wanted the healer's hand because he thinks it's magical or whatever. That part wasn't entirely clear either. The healer says he was going to attach it to his battle suit and somehow gain its powers, and I don't know what kind of fucking sense that's supposed to make either. But again, this is something we're just told in fleeting text boxes while stuff is happening all around us, and we're expected to just roll with it. But since you thwarted that whole scheme, all the healers in the known universe have suddenly become outlaws in record time. Suddenly they're all getting arrested left and right across the galaxy. Man, word travels fast around here. You'd think the Baron would now have a whole collection of severed hands at this point, but that's never really mentioned again, so whatever. And again, it's not entirely clear if the healers were always rebellious insurrectionists or if they're just a bunch of old geezers who got caught up in the middle of a political crossfire. It seems like it's the latter, but who knows, they never mentioned their allegiance. But the fact of the matter is that they are now very much persona non grata amongst the Vergans, whatever, or at least those who are loyal to the Emperor King and his little Baron buddy, and you're on a Vergan ship, so if anyone finds this dude, he's likely to get more than his hand chopped off. To compound matters, Boris also receives this hologram message from a representative of the Rebels' terrorist branch, who informs him that they've rigged the Starliner with a bunch of explosive devices that are set to go off at any moment, and apologizes for any inconvenience this may cause. Everyone seems to share this joint delusion that Boris is some sort of chosen one, which means that Boris is now ass deep in with a bunch of hooded dudes with magic hands, a group of subversive insurrectionists, and a race of oversized seafood creatures, whether he fucking likes it or not. So now with all of this suddenly becoming Boris's problem, he tracks down the room number of the healer by just butt dialing every single room aboard the Starliner until the right guy picks up the phone. I'm serious, there's no hint as to what this guy's name is or what cabin he's staying in. You're just supposed to go down this list one by one until you stumble upon the right one. Anyway, the dude tells Boris to haul ass over to his cabin because he has a very important message to deliver, and that message turns out to be the other half of the star chart that the missing hand dude gave us back on the wheel world. We still have no idea what we're supposed to do with this fucking thing, but the dude tells us to use it to find the lost star of Helldaba and retrieve a power gem that can be used to defeat the Emperor King of the Vergans. Are you still following me? He doesn't really seem to know how all this works either, only that Boris will probably figure it out no problem because, again, blah blah, prophecy and legend and chosen one and all that shit. Don't ask questions, just go, my son, off you scoot, we'll explain later, or as it turns out, not at all. No one explains a goddamn thing in this game. I'm doing my best here, but it's really hard to get a firm grip on any details because it's like the game doesn't even really care, or they ran out of time to actually write any coherent dialogue or whatever. All we really know for sure at this point is that we need to get off this ship before it explodes and go solve everyone's problems because no one else can be bothered to. And honestly, this is a lot of shit to pile on one hapless little twat who just arrived in this universe earlier this morning and's been spending the vast majority of the time being hunted down by mechanical death squads and collecting garbage. Anyway, the clock is ticking down before everything goes tits up on this lovely cruise. There are no escape pods, which seems like a bit of an oversight, and we left our flying car back on the wheel world. Luckily, this lady assassin shows up after you've talked to the healer and points a gun at you, at which point one of the bombs conveniently goes off and sends her sprawling to the ground while Boris somehow survives without a scratch. I'm not sure if she's dead, but she never shows up again, and if she hasn't croaked by now, she's probably going to in the next few minutes anyway, because Boris steals the keys to her flying car that's parked off in the landing bay, and off he fucks to the next part of the adventure. RIP everyone else on the Starliner. Sorry, omelets and eggs, people. I'm sure your loved ones will understand. Oh, you can also steal her gun, but there's no point because the inventory description says it's broken, and it just becomes another addition to Boris's growing collection of useless garbage. Anyway, stick with me here, we're almost near the end. The two parts of the star chart go into this phallic little monument, which transports Boris to the quote-unquote lost star of Heldeba, even though this is quite clearly a planet, not a star, but why would we expect anything to make sense at this point? And we haven't really been told what kind of planet this is, or why it's so important, other than there's a power gem here somewhere that we for some reason need to acquire in order to do something that no one else seems to be able to explain what is, but hey, we're the chosen one, right? I'm sure this will all make sense in a moment. Spoiler, it never does. Look, I have the sidebar here. This whole Boris is the chosen one thing seems like an absolute crock of horseshit. If these healer dudes had both pieces of the star chart in their possession already, why didn't they just get their ass to the Mechanthalar galaxy and shove it into this penis rock and get the power gem for themselves? Why is Boris so important? It kind of seems like anyone could have done this if they were so inclined, which leads me to believe that either these healers and rebels have no idea what they're doing, or they're all just a bunch of lazy bastards. I mean, sure, Boris is young and spry, not to mention insanely gullible, but he's also just one dude who has literally no idea what he's doing. And he sure as shit could have used an extra pair of hands here, because this power gem is protected by a spider web of laser beams, and the only way to deactivate them is to stand on no less than 6 pressure plates all at once. Yes, we're doing pressure plate puzzles now. Did I mention these guys went on to create Tomb Raider? I think I did. So by virtue of having only 2 legs and no one around to help him, Boris has to dash around all these pressure plates, which are incidentally indistinguishable from just normal slabs of rock. Sure, you're told via this handy diagram where they are, but they don't even lower into the ground or make any noise when you activate them, so it's just fucking guesswork. At first I thought you had to find something to put down on each of the plates, but there's nothing to pick up here except for this single rock. Thanks, game. I already have an impressive collection of rocks in my inventory, but I guess a new addition is always welcome. And I thought, well, maybe this is where my extensive hoarding of intergalactic garbage might come in handy. Maybe I put a piece of trash down on each of the plates and then stand on the last one myself, but no, that's not the solution. The solution is to simply run around on each of the plates before the invisible timer runs out, at which point the spider web lasers deactivate for a very short while. Like I said, there's no indication of whether you're doing it right or not, so you end up just going into full headless chicken mode and scooting all over the place in the vague hope that you'll somehow hit all the pressure plates in time, and once you finally do get it, you haven't got enough time to just run up and get the power gem, so instead you're meant to chuck this fucking rock at it, hoping that this ancient and powerful artifact won't just fucking shatter in the process, and then Boris gets attacked by fucking ghosts for no fucking reason. Alright, back through the inexplicable wormhole we go, and now, with the power gem in hand, Boris somehow figures out that he can use it to power up a teleporter on this Michaelian spaceship that has apparently crash-landed on a neighboring planet, where he meets one of the cuddly crab creatures who tells him nothing of any discernible value other than reiterating how chosen he is, and then chucks him back out of the ship. This pointless scene acts as an in-game trigger that spawns the arrival of a Vergan prison ship, the Colossus, which has been commandeered by the rebels who are on their way to launch a full frontal assault on the Vergan homeworld Koros. God, what? Okay, pause. Let's try and get a handle on these rebels and what their whole deal is. These guys are Vergans as well, but they're none too happy with their leader, who's the real main baddie of the story, Emperor King Nyamezes, which first of all seems redundant. An emperor rules an empire and a king rules a kingdom, so isn't an emperor just a fancier word for king? And also, Nyamezes is not only a name that's very hard to pronounce, but it's also a very on-the-nose garble of the word nemesis, so it's kind of like calling your villain Dr. Evil or Darth Sidious. God, science fiction names are such bullshit. So far, Baron Kaliv is the one who's been causing all the grief for us, but he's just the Emperor King's right-hand man and chief whipping boy who was tasked with wiping out Boris, which is why he keeps teleporting in our faces and pointing angrily at us. Anyway, Emperor King Nemesis here isn't just content with being the ruler of everything he sees, he's also gone completely insane and sees himself as a living god. And he's convinced that by harnessing the mythical and mystical and poorly explained powers of the healers and or possibly the elusive technology of the Michaelian, he can transform himself into an actual god and maybe finally get invited to all the real cool parties or whatever a despotic shit biscuit of his caliber does with his free time. The Michaelians, however, as previously mentioned, are the crab-like race who have this cool, funky, godlike technology, although to them, stuff like this mystical power gem artifact is just like a normal D-cell battery. The crab dude inside the crashed Michaelian ship told Boris that they just used the gems as power sources for their ships and whatever, and indeed, the only way Boris found his way into the ship in the first place was to just shove this power gem into the access panel on the side of the ship, which begs the question, if these gems are so plentiful, why haven't the Vergans just looted them from the Michaelian homeworlds? Or did I miss something about how rare these gems are and why they became rare, and if that's the case, why is seemingly the only one left being guarded in a temple behind a laser grid on a planet full of ghosts that can only be accessed by tripping a black hole teleporter by shoving 2 stones on a stick into a penis rock? Again, what the fuck is this place even? Is it the Michaelian homeworld? If so, why aren't the ghosts crabs then? Either all this information blasted past me despite me playing through the game on no less than 3 occasions, or perhaps far more likely, they just forgot to offer any explanations for all this shit. Fuck it, now we're on board this prison ship that's been commandeered by the rebels and they're about to go rain down some fire on the Empire's capital, so you would think these guys would be the Empire's primary concern, but didn't this dude aboard the Starliner say they were at war with the Michaelians, not a rebellion? And why does this dude keep grabbing the air like he's groping a pair of invisible butt cheeks? This dude is the Man Brute who... Sorry, I can't say that with a straight face. The Man Brute is a defector from the Emperor King's army, but don't get too attached to him because the next time we see him, he'll be almost dead anyway. He tells you to go down to Koros, the planet they're about to bomb the shit out of, and chat up a dude named Doshiv, who will then aid you as best he can, which, as it turns out, just means pointing you towards a large wall guarded by more robot death squads who, for some reason, don't recognize Boris and blast a hole in him on sight, and tells you that the Emperor King's palace is on the other side of these massive impenetrable steel walls, and then he fucks right off and disappears out of our lives. Cheers, buddy, that's a massive help. So instead, Boris decides to wander off and go sightseeing, and oh boy, big mistake, cause wham, it's Baron time again. Apparently this guy has the powers to teleport in wherever he pleases, but for some reason he only uses these powers sparingly. I mean, he could have just teleported onto the Starliner and snuffed out Boris if he wanted to. He clearly knew that Boris was there because he sent his L'Oreal commercial of an assassin there, but I guess he was just busy doing evil shit somewhere else at the time. Anyway, now he teleports in and tries to throw a Hadouken at Boris, but it backfires and slams him in the gut instead because the power gem somehow knows that Boris is good and the Baron is evil, so it Uno'd the Hadouken back at him. Are you fucking kidding me? It's a good thing the power gem wasn't around to witness Boris shoving a robot down a shaft to its death, or slamming several dozen jetpackers against the side of buildings also to their deaths, or even trading illicit drugs with hermits and ne'er-do-well smugglers. Otherwise it might have had some second thoughts at this point. So Boris takes this opportunity to nick the Baron's ID so his idiot robot minions will mistakenly believe Boris is the Baron for some peculiar reason, and obediently blast a hole in the side of the building. The Baron then shows up and orders the idiot droids to pursue Boris, and this leads to the most infuriating part of the game. A maze on a timer. Okay, I get it. We're in the final stretch. We gotta have some excitement, and a chase scene would surely liven things up before the final confrontation, but a fucking maze while you're being chased? Get fucked. And this timer is strict because the fucking thing is actually chasing you. Universe is one of those rare adventure games where NPCs can actually move independently outside the screen you're currently on, like Revolution Software's games Lure of the Temptress and Beneath the Steel Sky, and this sucks, because this is literally the only section where Core Design chose to flex these muscles. Well, except for these roaming droids aboard the Starliner that, yeah. But of course here, the tech works flawlessly. This guy's on your ass the entire time and he does not cut you any slack. Luckily, the maze isn't that complicated, and it's easy to memorize even for an imbecile like me, but the fucking gall to have a maze where you're being chased around while you're trying to get your bearings and mapping this shit out. Talk about callous design. And even when you get to the end and meet this giant lizard creature, the timer isn't over. You have to quickly toss the Baron's ID into its mouth and hide, which causes the stupid droid to awkwardly float up and get eaten by the lizard, even though it can plainly see Boris's stupid face peeking out from behind the lizard's tail. But hold up. The only reason this piss bucket was chasing you in the first place was because you're carrying the Baron's ID around with you, so why didn't Boris just dump it somewhere in the fucking maze? I mean, how about right here at the start where there's a convenient alcove for stashing things? Because, side note, this alcove sure shit isn't good for anything else. Boris even says, oh, he'll never find me here, which I thought meant you were supposed to play this little cat and mouse game with the droid, but no, turns out the droid will absolutely find you anyway, because newsflash, Boris, me old son, he's tracking the fucking ID in your pocket, which you could just dump anywhere and it would literally get him off your back. Why are you such a fucking idiot, Boris? It wasn't until I played the game for a third time that I realized you can open the door here, then go hide in the alcove, and the droid will then go through the open door instead of going after Boris, which also makes no goddamn fucking sense because again, it's supposed to be tracking him through the Baron's ID, but at least it buys you a bit of extra time. It doesn't get rid of the droid. Oh no, he's still on your ass. It just adds a few extra seconds to the timer, as does shoving this rock in his face. But anyway, after this delightful sojourn, you arrive at the top of the Emperor's Tower and run into the Sorry, I just can't do it. I mean, I can understand the intentionally eye-rollingly weird George Lucas-ish naming of stars, planets, and characters like Jorslav, Darla Korv, Doshiv, Kaliv, even God Emperor King Naimehises. But what the fuck kind of name is Manbrute? His speech portrait looks like a Baron of Hell on Valium, and he's introduced so late in the game through a single conversation that is honestly kind of baffling what he's even doing here in the first place. Or why Boris seems so broken up when he sees him crumpled in a heap of disappointment here at the end of the game. Anyway, the Manbrute gives Boris a armor glove, which he expects Boris to use to lob the power gem at the God Emperor King, because again, the power gem rejects evil, and maybe this will somehow defeat the Emperor, who knows? Worth a shot, right? Off you go, my boy. So Boris runs off to do just that. The big boy Emperor rolls up.
Touch, golden boy.
He then launches into his I'm so deliciously evil speech before his sniveling minion, Baron Kaliv, spots Boris and is like, don't worry boss, I got this, and teleports over to Boris to dish out the ultimate bitch slap despite full well knowing that this didn't go terribly well the last time. And this is where things get a bit weird once again. Boris yells out some shit about how the Baron is planning to overthrow the Emperor, and the Emperor is like, hold on, let me check his personnel records. Oh, good lord, you're right. And then he zaps the Baron off into exile, into a void of nothingness. What? Pause. When did this come up? The Baron has been nothing but a sycophantic bootlicker this entire time. There's no indication whatsoever that he was planning on giving the Emperor the old Julius Caesar. And why is this in his personal files? Did he write his power fantasies down in his diary and then upload them to the government mainframe or something? Why does the Emperor even take the time to check out his HR records on the spot in the middle of a grand procession on the word of the so-called chosen one? You know, the dude who's supposedly destined to bring your ass down? Yeah, hold on. Let me look into this. These are serious allegations. Everyone, let's just put the brakes on until we figure this out. What the fuck, guys? Surely we could have thought of any other way to get rid of the Baron that wasn't so anticlimactic. I don't know, maybe set up this whole plot point a bit in advance so it didn't just sideswipe us out of left field, and I don't know. Then again, why should I expect anything else at this point? I've already had to go back and rewrite vast parts of this script multiple times because this whole rebel Michaelian healer shit just does not make any fucking sense to me. And I'm not even sure I got any of that right, but I seriously don't give a fuck anymore. Okay, Fucking goddammit. I'm just going to call him MB from now on. MB gave us a very explicit hint in all caps that we should throw the gem at Golden Boy and let the magic take care of the rest. Remember, this thing somehow instinctively knows when someone is evil, so it's sure to rain down a torrential tsunami of whoop-ass on this guy, right? I mean, when all else fails, just put your trust in superstitious bullshit and hope everything works out for the best. That's what I always say. Works every time. So I was all ready, hand clasped around my mouth, beads of sweat cascading down my brow, heart rate at peak square pusher intensity, ready for the inevitable timed puzzle where you'd have to quickly throw the gem, or maybe we'd have a throwing minigame where you have to lob this thing Gorilla.Bass style at some obvious fuck me light in his chest, but no, this shit just takes care of itself on autopilot. We get a nice close-up of the Emperor blasting to pieces, and then everyone is like, yeah, we never actually really liked that guy, and just start celebrating, because all it takes to win over your political opponents is to just blow up the opposing leader, and I'm sure all is forgiven after decades of strife and thousands of casualties on either side. And all it took was one scrawny little British kid who immediately decided what side of an intergalactic conflict he was on based solely on witnessing an old guy getting mugged and getting tossed from one barely defined set piece after another whilst constantly being fed a load of bullshit about how important he is. Oh look, there's Sylphina with 2 A's. And her friend Melina, also with 2 A's. I'm so glad you guys were by my side through this perilous adventure. I never could have done it without you. And also, Arm-Waving Guy 1 and Arm-Waving Guy 2, you guys were the best. And the text says they immediately installed a new government and put Man-Brute in charge. I mean, who's more qualified to discount Doom Monster here? No one. That's who. And then Boris's uncle shows up out of nowhere and says, all right, time to go home, buddy boy. Your tea's getting cold. And what the fuck did you come from? And why do we have to hurry home? We're about to pop the victory champagne here and maybe get freaky with the 2 A's a bit for the after party. You're going to haul our ass home now? Oh, well, all right. I guess it's past Boris's curfew anyway. So back through the teleporter of bullshit we go, and the game ends with Boris realizing he's still wearing Sylphina with 2 A's power suit and surmising that if he's not going to get to double dip his tickle stick in a pair of parallel dimension floozies, then maybe having a fancy jacket with an alien Fitbit arm attachment can drop some knickers at the local pub. That is, if you can find the proper verb for it in this god-awful UI. My god, what the fuck did I just play? First of all, the story seems like someone had an idea for a grand space opera and then didn't realize it was a total Star Wars knockoff. The plot itself is absurdly convoluted, but also half-baked at the same time. It glosses over important plot points such as telling us who these rebels actually are and how they're tied to the benevolent crap monsters and why they decided to blow up a Starliner with less than 10 passengers, one of which being one of their own, or at least one that's sympathetic to their cause, why this precious alien gemstone is also a power source and a magic shield, but for some reason needs an additional pair of AA batteries to power a simple cloaking device, or what all this business with a DNA splicer is. I didn't even mention that part because I still don't get it. Apparently that's also part of the God Emperor King's big plan, but I swear I played this game all the way through 3 times and I still have no idea what the fuck that was all about. On the other hand, the game over-explains trivial stuff, like how Boris's alien jacket has magic pockets, and that's the reason why he can have a massive amounts of objects in his inventory, despite him already being able to carry a metal bar, a sharp piece of glass, and about 4 metric tons of interstellar garbage on his person before he picks up the suit. It also goes out of its way to explain why Boris can somehow understand the alien language and breathe in outer space, and also why we're seeing these interstitial cutscenes, because Boris is apparently witnessing these through his mind's eye. I mean, we know what a cutscene is, goddammit. You don't have to tell us why they're there. Stuff like that, for some reason, seems way more important to explain than any of the important plot details, so it's honestly a bit baffling why Core spent so much time crafting so much backstory and lore. I mean, the manual has a full-on index of planets and races you'll encounter, but keeps things irritatingly vague when it comes to actually telling you why you should give a shit. And the in-game dialogue is so sparse and poorly written that the plot itself just speeds past you without any of the core ideas and story beats landing in any coherent form. The whole thing just comes across as some sort of psychedelic fever dream that was cooked up after a midnight marathon of the first 3 Star Wars movies and a very long pub crawl. And if you think I'm belaboring the Star Wars comparison, think about it. The healers, shitty Jedis. The Baron, shitty Vader. The Vergans, shitty Empire. The Emperor, shitty Palpatine.
Touch Golden Boy.
Shit, they've even got Yoda in here, except he's on drugs and hallucinating, and you can even ask him if he was in fucking Star Wars. All that's missing is a couple of vaguely homosexual droids and a ruggedly handsome scoundrel smuggler, you got yourself a Star Wars. Sure, we're also missing a princess, but that's because this is a core design game, and female characters were just not their thing back then. I mean, sure, if you're being charitable, I guess you could say they've upped their game from 0 female characters in Curse of Enchantia, save for the witches who were all mindlessly evil antagonists, to 3 female characters, but 2 of them get knocked out flat within 30 seconds of being introduced, and the 3rd one is completely absent except for the ending less than a minute before the credits roll. I can see why Core Design never made more than 2 adventure games. This shit just wasn't their jam. Their first game had no story whatsoever, and when they finally decided to actually attempt a story in this game, it turned out to be the most asinine derivative pile of shit in the history of interactive fiction. At least Star Wars kept it simple. Big bad empire has a big bad superweapon, and our heroes go on a quest to blow it up. Simple. Not this game. This game has rebels, aliens, healers, emperors, barons, mystical artifacts, lost stars that actually lost planets, and a guy who looks like a turd with horns, all competing for top spot as the most important thing in the story, and it all comes out as a total mess because Boris just goes along with all of it and doesn't ask any meaningful questions along the way. The only redeeming factor about this game is the absolutely gobsmackingly beautiful graphics. Once again, all the backgrounds were drawn by a single dude. His name is Rolf Moore, and he fucking over-delivered too. I mean, this beautiful painting, on screen for about 10 seconds. This one, same. I would gladly have 80 of these paintings framed and proudly displayed on my wall because these graphics are easily some of the best shit this genre has ever seen. And this guy had some stiff fucking competition at the time, but he absolutely smokes about 99% of his contemporaries with this shit. He's just far too talented to be wasting his efforts on this shit. No, wait, I take that back. It turns out this game was actually his idea, so he kind of brought this on himself. An amazing graphic artist, absolutely top tier, but a storyteller, no, bottom shelf, corner of the basement stuff. But even when you're playing the game, most of the areas only have 1 or 2 things to do in them, tops, so even as you're exploring these gorgeous environments, you're only there for however long it takes for you to work out what that is, and then you'll never see it again. That just seems like such a monumentally disproportionate amount of effort. And as beautiful as each and every pixel of these backgrounds are, there's still one fundamental flaw with most of them. They're all drawn from a perspective that's so far away that all the characters are really tiny, and when you've got tiny characters, you've got even tinier hotspots. I mean, look at this Starliner lounge. Everyone is like 10 pixels tall max, and this hotspot for the elevator is fucking microscopic. It's also really hard to tell where the screen exits are sometimes. There's actually an exit on this screen that leads you to the monorail overpass, but good luck finding it. I ran around this screen for close to 10 minutes trying to find it, and that's only because I knew it was there somewhere. If I hadn't, I would have just assumed I was soft-locked. I'll save you some hassle. It's right here next to the homeless guy. The game is also full of these janky little moments where you're gonna get fucking aggravated. In fact, I think it's fair to say that other than the graphics and the music, which I'll come back to in a moment, no one brought their A game to this thing because the game is janky as all hell, the puzzle design is atrocious, and the UI can go die in a fucking fire. The best thing I can say about the technical side of things is that they somehow managed to squeeze 256 color graphics out of the Amiga, which is an impressive feat given that the standard color depth of a stock Amiga is a measly 32 colors. You may not even have noticed, but the footage in this video has actually been a hodgepodge of stuff I recorded from the Amiga version, the CD32 version, and the DOS PC version. They look fucking identical, which, in fairness, is an amazing achievement, but everything else is dog shit. I mean, navigating Boris around the screens is an absolute chore because the little fucker seemingly can't round a corner without getting stuck, and if you tell him to perform even the simplest task, like, say, get in the fucking car from more than 10 feet away, chances are he'll either have forgotten what it was he was supposed to do by the time he gets there, or he'll pull a Ken Clean Air system and just stop dead in his tracks at the first sign of an obstacle. And I was dreading playing the CD32 version because that one has no mouse support, so I was stuck playing through the entire game with a goddamn Nintendo Switch controller, but it actually made the game a lot easier to play because for once I had direct control over Boris. Unlike the other 2 versions, you move him around with a D-pad instead of clicking somewhere on the screen and crossing your fingers he doesn't have a stroke on his way there, and thus you're able to circumvent obstacles with far greater ease than what the abysmal pathfinding of the other 2 versions could ever hope to accomplish. But even so, you've still got to contend with the goddamn war crime that is the interface. Core learned absolutely nothing from their previous game. The action bar is still a bewildering clusterfuck of nested menus and pointless verbs, and the most challenging conundrums in this game once again boil down to figuring out which of these icons will actually accomplish anything useful in any given situation. There is no useful feedback whatsoever when you get it wrong, other than you can't do that, or that doesn't work, or no response, whatever. Not even the slightest hint as to whether you're actually on the right track or not. not. So you end up just going through the verbs one by one, laundry list style, and trying them on every hotspot on every screen, hoping that something interesting will happen. And they still pull these insane what the fuck tricks. Like when you want Boris to get in his car, you have to jump car. In fact, jump is probably the verb that's used the most often in this game, and you have to wonder just how fucking out of ideas you have to be if 70% of your puzzles can be solved by simply jumping at or off something. In contrast, the where verb is used exactly once in this game, insert and push-pull maybe 2 or 3 times, and eat isn't used at all, so why the fuck is it even here? And why the fuck is attack one of the main verbs when it's only used once in the entire game? I mean, yeah, it would be great fun to try all of these verbs on stuff if any of them gave any humorous responses, like the smell and taste icons in Space Quest 4, which were similarly useless, but nonetheless dispensed some of the best jokes in the game. But in Universe, if you're not doing exactly what the game wants you to do, all you get is...
Computer says nah.
And okay, look, in the past I've gone on a few times about how point-and-click games assume too much by simply giving you a ubiquitous use verb that's a catch-all for every interaction you could possibly perform in an adventure game, and it is refreshing to see a game that actually gives you a variety of options for how you want to interact with your surroundings. Except this game also has a fucking use verb. Well, why give me any of the other verbs if I can just use anything I want? What exactly doesn't use cover? Core blimey, you guys. How fucking drunk were you when you came up with this interface, and why didn't you ever sober up? The music is pretty good though, and this might be a good time to finally talk about the 3 different versions. 4, if you want to get technical, because the DOS version came out on both floppy disks and CD-ROM, but I'll get to that in a bit. While the visuals are practically identical across each version, the music very much isn't. In fact, you get 3 entirely different soundtracks for each version, and I don't mean they just sound different because of the different audio capabilities of each platform. No, I mean the music itself is entirely different. 3 versions of the same game, 3 completely different soundtracks. The Amiga version uses mod tracking music and is probably the best of the lot. It's clearly how the game was intended to sound because it's got the most music tracks by far. Pretty much every screen has its own dedicated theme and they all sound really good, but then again, I'm a sucker for mod tracking music. The CD32 version doesn't have nearly as much music, probably owing to the space limitations, so it ends up recycling a lot of the tracks throughout the game, but it's got a nice synthwave vibe to it, and I really dig it. Both of these soundtracks were composed by Martin Iveson, who also did the music for the PC version of Curse of Enchantia, which also had pretty good music. But the soundtrack to the PC version of Universe was composed, uncredited, by Nathan McCree, who went on to compose the soundtracks for the first 3 Tomb Raider games. And this one is also really good, although it's perhaps the most sparse soundtrack of the 3. It keeps things very simple, and it's probably the weakest of the 3. Again, it's not what I call terrible. In fact, all 3 soundtracks are pretty good. Anyway, the game came out on CD-ROM for both the Amiga CD32 and DOS platforms, and naturally you would expect these versions to include voice acting as well as enhanced CD quality music. Nope, sorry, all you get is enhanced music in the CD32 version, and the PC CD-ROM version is even less impressive because it doesn't even have the enhanced music. No, it's just literally the PC floppy disk version dumped onto a shiny disk, all 7 megabytes of it. Fuck, why even bother putting out the game on CD in the first place then? Jesus, you'd have to ask Core Design because I have no fucking idea. The best thing about the PC version though is that apparently it has this Easter egg in it with a scroll text that I don't know how to trigger in-game, but you can read the text by just opening the executable in like Notepad Plus or something. The PC version was outsourced to some outfit called East Point Software, and while Core included them in the main credits of the game singing their praises, the lead programmer of the PC version, a gentleman by the name of Neil Beresford, took this opportunity to vent his mild frustration at having to port this game, apparently single-handedly, while also claiming he has an IQ in excess of 500. It's a funny, very tongue-in-cheek message that I wish someone would figure out how to trigger in-game, because I'm pretty sure this has gone undiscovered since the game's release in 1994, and I'm sure it's the sort of thing that people like Oddheader and the Easter Egg Hunter would get a kick out. Shout out to those guys, by the way, they're really cool. Anyway, that's Universe, a game that's the very definition of looks can be deceiving. Does it look great? Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. Does it sound great? Sure, it's not too bad. But the rest is just, in the word of Mr. Beresford, the pits. The story is shit, the writing is shit, the puzzles are shit, and the UI is hands down the worst ever in the history of adventure gaming. It is definitely not the epic sci-fi masterpiece they thought it was going to be, and I'll tell you what it also isn't. It is definitely not Space Quest. I'm the Space Quest historian. Until next time, fuck it. I'll see you around the Chrono Stream. Bye.
Bye, you will have.
Man Brute